Hello and welcome back to the Israel Truth, a six-part series written by Brooks Alden. Part 3, Not Everyone's Blind. One of the most difficult aspects of the Israel Truth is to come face to face with the fact that our long-held view that the Jewish people are Israel is simply wrong. Initially, there is even a bit of sorrow that the blindness has been removed from our eyes, as we think of our Jewish friends as pretenders. Yet we must remember that just as the vast majority of true Israelites think of themselves as Gentiles, with only a few understanding their identity, the vast majority of Jewish people sincerely believe they are Israelites, and only a few of them understand that most Jews are not. Don't misunderstand. Some Jewish people are indeed Israelites, estimated at approximately 10%. Indeed, a goodly number. Keep clearly in mind also that the vast majority of Jewry are good people and should not be blamed because they have innocently taken on the Israelite identity. Always remember the blindness on both sides was God-inspired. Ironically, from a common-sense standpoint, it is this blindness more than anything that proves who is Israel and who is not. Contemplate on this for a moment. Romans 11:25 demonstrates that Israelites were to be blind to their identity. So who is blind? Is it the Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, Scandinavian, and kindred peoples? Or is it the Jewish people who claim to be the chosen ones? Realistically, they couldn't make this claim if they were true Israel, for the Bible emphatically states that Israel is to be blind to their identity. All this proves is that both true Israel and the Jewish people are blind. Part 2 of this series outlines the many marks of identification of true Israel, but very quickly, we should examine a few in greater light. I say this because there is such a contrast between true Israel and the Jewish people that any accurate study has to reflect the contrast. For example, the most obvious one is, which group was referred to by another name? The Jewish people have retained the name Jews throughout the centuries, yet the Israelites were to have another name. That is Christian, as Isaiah 62, 265:15 makes very clear. It follows then that if the Jewish people were the chosen ones, they would have taken on the new name. Then too, Hosea 1:10 tells us that Israel were to be a multitudinous people. Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, Scandinavian, and kindred peoples are such a people. The Jewish people are not, in fact. Jeremiah 15:7 says they were to be bereft of children. Before going on, let's just look at just four more significant contrasts. Jeremiah 31:33 tells us that Israel was to come under the new covenant. The Jewish people remain under the old law. Hosea 1:10 states that Israelites were to become the sons of God, to accept Jesus Christ. The Jewish people continue to reject him as the Messiah. Jeremiah 33:17 indicates that Israel was to have a monarchy that would last forever. The Jewish people have no king on earth. Both Isaiah 54:17 and Leviticus 26:6-8 say that Israel was to be immune from defeat in war, yet the Jews have suffered endless persecution. It is important to understand that even though true Israel is blinded as to her identity, God made provision that there would be a small remnant that would know their roots. There are hundreds of examples, but I've recorded a few of the better-known names from the last few centuries. Most of these were taken from Robert Allen Balash's book, Uncovering the Mysteries of Your Hidden Inheritance. Let's begin with the great explorer Christopher Columbus. In 1502 AD, he wrote King Ferdinand of Spain in referring to his discovery of America. He said, "Fully accomplished were the words of Isaiah." It was assumed he referred to Isaiah 49:1-12. A more recent expert, RAYMOND CAPT, was a noted archaeologist, Bible scholar, and prolific writer and film producer. He wrote of the Israel Truth in many of his books. One of my great favorites is Davidson, a highly educated structural engineer of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. God certainly touched his life, for after an exhaustive study of the measurements of the Great Pyramid, commonly referred to as the Bible in stone, this non-Christian man received Christ as Savior and accepted the Israel truth. He was a highly prolific writer and lecturer, and once wrote, "The time, however, is fast approaching, when, according to the prophecies, the identity of lost Israel is to be disclosed to all nations together with the revelation of God's purpose concerning Israel's relationship to all other races." So, for all our non-Christian friends, you can see what a little study can reveal. You see, Jesus Christ is our Savior. Every schoolchild is familiar with the great explorer and statesman, Sir Francis Drake, who lived from 1540 to 1596. He wrote a letter to John Foxe, the author of Foxe's Book of Martyrs, that said in part, "God may be glorified, his church, our queen and country, preserved, the enemies of truth vanquished, that we might have continual peace in Israel." Perhaps the greatest monarch in the Protestant era was Queen Elizabeth I, a true monarch of destiny. During her reign from 1558 to 1603, she was known as the Light of Israel, and her knowledge of her identity as a descendant of the House of David was reflected in many of her messages. Here's my favorite British monarch, King George VI, the great and inspirational World War II monarch. What is not well known is that in 1922, when he was Albert, the Duke of York, he said, "I am sure the British Israelite business is true. I've read a lot about it lately, and everything, no matter how large or small, points to our being the chosen race." And how about King James I, Elizabeth's successor in 1603? He referred to himself as King of Israel and had a coin minted to reflect Ezekiel 37:22. It is also significant that he commissioned the King James Bible. Turning to America, let us remember Thomas Jefferson, a founder of America and one of the great intellects of all time. He wrote these words in talking about the death of George Washington: "I felt on his death with my countrymen, that verily a great man hath fallen this day in Israel." We should never forget a great American from a well-known intellectual family, Professor Roger Rusk, who passed on in 1994. He was highly educated and former professor of physics at the University of Tennessee. He authored The Other End of the World, a book expounding the Israel truth. Rusk's brother, Dean Rusk, was a former Secretary of State in America and probably was aware of the Israel truth, although his position never let him talk freely about it. Jonathan Turnbull, who was colonial governor of Connecticut, wrote General George Washington the following words: "Now therefore be strong and very courageous. May the God of the armies of Israel shower down the blessings of his divine providence upon you." And finally, General Sir Walter Walker, a highly decorated American and former Commander-in-Chief of NATO, wrote often on the Israel truth. We could go on and on with names of high-profile believers, including Robert the Bruce, King Robert I of Scotland, who, along with his nobles, issued the Scottish Declaration of Independence of 1320, which clearly traces their Israelite roots. Yet perhaps more important are the tens of thousands of not well-known Israelites who have heard and embraced the Israel truth over the centuries, and in doing so have had the pages of the Bible light up as never before. As well, a book entitled The New Jerusalem throws considerable light on the Israel truth. Well-known best-selling author Adrian Gilbert wrote the book. It is carried by most booksellers and is recommended reading. By the beginning of the 20th century, there seemed to be a need for more Israel truth organizations, and one of the first was this association, then called the British Israel Association. In Part 4, the founding of the association on August 2nd, 1909 deals a little bit with the early days. Thank you very much for watching Part 3 of the Israel Truth. Not everyone's blind. Look for our next video in the series, The Founding of the Association. If you would like to learn more about the Israel Truth and our message, consider requesting a complimentary copy of our monthly magazine, Thy Kingdom Come, where we talk more about biblical, historical, and current events. Our association is funded entirely through donations, but the magazine is our gift to you.